The old house on Clemson Street was always the quietest on its street. The neighbors had long since grown accustomed to my routine of going out to the garden at 8 o'clock in the morning, watering my roses and dahlias, and then either going into town or staying home, occasionally receiving visitors from my book club. On this cool fall morning, I stood at the window watching the janitors remove fallen leaves from the sidewalk. My wrinkled hands clutched a cup of cooled tea. 73 is no joke, especially when you're reminded of it regularly. I wrinkled my nose, remembering the last conversation I'd had with my son. Hugo, as usual, had started from afar, talking about his colleagues who took a very responsible approach to caring for their elderly parents, and then he carelessly mentioned another brochure of the Sunny Harbor Nursing Home, which he was accidentally given at work. The brochure still lay untouched on my coffee table. "I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself," I muttered, turning away from the window. My gaze fell on a photograph of my late husband, Ernest. It had been 3 years since he'd been gone, 3 years since my life had been divided into before and after. Ernest never treated me like a helpless old woman. We ran our small bookstore, Pages, together in downtown Crown Point until illness forced us to sell it. But even then, even in his last days, Ernest treated me as an equal. Not like Hugo and his wife Sylvia, who spoke to me with the tone of condescending overseers. I sighed and set the cup on the table. Somewhere in the street, a car honked. When I looked at my watch, I realized I was late for my walk. Every day, regardless of the weather, I walked at least 2 miles through the quiet streets of Crown Point, a habit Ernest had instilled in me years ago. "Movement is life, dear," he used to say. After getting dressed and taking my cane, more for safety than out of necessity, I walked outside. The air smelled like fall, fallen leaves and the smoke of fireplaces. I loved this time of year for the brightness of the colors and the lack of stifling summer heat. Crown Point in the fall looked like a picture from a glossy magazine, red and gold maples, neat houses with carved pumpkins on their porches, wreaths of corn cobs on their doors. As I passed the Taylor's house, I noticed that they had already set up Halloween decorations in the garden, glowing ghosts and plastic headstones. Too early, in my opinion, but youngsters are always in a hurry. Returning home around noon, I met the mailman who handed me a stack of envelopes, mostly bills and sales brochures, but there was also a letter from my friend Bertha in Arizona. We corresponded the old-fashioned way, preferring paper and ink to emails. At home, I made myself a turkey and cheese sandwich, made fresh tea, and sat down at the table to sort through the mail. An electric bill, a water bill, an ad for a new pizza place, a letter from Berta, and I frowned, looking at the envelope with no return address. Opening it, I found a brochure for an elderly care center. Inside was a note written in Sylvia's handwriting. "Think about it. It's not far from us. We could visit you more often." I crumpled the pamphlet and tossed it in the trash. They wouldn't leave me alone. Hugo visited me twice a month, and each visit turned into a lecture on the age-related risks of independent living. Sylvia was usually silent, but her gaze wandering around the rooms told me that she was already mentally arranging her furniture. In the back of my mind, I knew that they were not so much concerned about my safety as they were about the value of the house. Real estate in our neighborhood was skyrocketing in price. A neighbor's smaller house had recently sold for a hefty sum. A phone call interrupted my thoughts. It was Odette, my granddaughter. "Grandma, are you home? I finished class early and wanted to stop by." "Of course, dear." My voice warmed. I was just about to make cinnamon cookies. Odette was the light in my life. At 18, she was the only member of the family who actually listened to me instead of just nodding absent-mindedly. Unlike her parents, Odette never talked about nursing homes or security. Half an hour later, the doorbell heralded the arrival of her granddaughter. Odette, a slender girl with short dark hair and bright green eyes, hugged me tightly. "You smell like cinnamon," she smiled as she entered the house. "The cookies are already in the oven." I led my granddaughter into the kitchen. "How was your day?" Odette threw her bag on a chair and sat down at the table. "Nothing much. The economics lecture was deadly boring. And then lab practice, she was studying computer science at the local college. But I finished a project for a startup incubator. Do you want to see it?" Without waiting for an answer, Odette pulled out her laptop and opened some program with graphs and numbers. I nodded, even though I didn't understand much about the technical details. The important thing was that my granddaughter was engrossed. "And you know what? I have something for you," Odette said suddenly, closing the laptop. "Just give me a second." She ran out of the kitchen and came back with a small box. "What's this?" I asked, looking at the device that Odette pulled out of the box. "It's a surveillance camera," my granddaughter explained. "It's wireless, and it connects to the internet. You can watch everything that happens at home, even when you're not there, through an app on your phone." I eyed the device warily. "Why would I do that?" Odette sat down next to me. "Grandma, remember when you said you sometimes felt like someone was in the house when you were away? That things didn't lay the way you left them?" I nodded. Indeed, I'd noticed oddities a few times, books rearranged, furniture shifted, but I put it down to forgetfulness. "Well, with this camera, you'll know for sure. It records everything that happens and saves it in the cloud, which is an online storage facility. Plus, it's motion activated, so if someone enters the house, the camera will record it." I thought about it. The idea was tempting, but I didn't really trust modern technology. "I don't know how to use any of this stuff," I said. "I'll set it up," Odette assured me, "and I'll show you how to watch the tapes. It's really easy." For the next hour, Odette set up the camera on a bookshelf in the living room, giving me a good view of the front door and most of the room. She set up an app on my phone and gave me a little tutorial on how to use it. "Here, you click here, and you can see what's going on in real time. And here, you can see the previous day's entries." To my surprise, it wasn't as complicated as I had feared. I even felt some satisfaction in watching my living room through the phone screen. "Do your father and Sylvia know about this?" I asked, pointing to the camera. Odette shrugged. "I haven't told them." "Why? Don't tell them," I said firmly. "It would be our secret." After my granddaughter left, I sat in my chair for a long time, thinking. The camera gave me a strange sense of security. Now I could control the situation without relying on Hugo's or Sylvia's word. I had no doubt they were up to something. My son's last visit had been particularly insistent. Hugo had brought some papers for me to sign. Just formalities for insurance, as he put it. But I wouldn't sign them, saying I wanted to have them reviewed first by a lawyer I knew. Hugo was angry, though he tried not to show it. And Sylvia took a lot of pictures of the house with her phone, explaining that she wanted to preserve the memories. I hummed. Memories indeed. More like they were already planning how to get rid of my furniture and what they could sell. The thought made me bitter. We had once had a normal relationship. Hugo had been an attentive son, especially when he was young. But after he married Sylvia, everything changed. I never said it out loud, but I thought it was my daughter-in-law who was turning my son against me, whispering in his ear about money and inheritance. That evening, as I was getting ready for bed, I remembered that I had to go to my book club meeting tomorrow. We were going to discuss the novel Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier, one of my favorite books. The meeting was to be held at Gretchen Pierce's house 3 blocks away. As I tucked myself into bed, I thought tomorrow would be a good day to check on the security camera. I'd be gone at least 3 hours, and if anything happened in the house while I was gone, the camera would pick it up. With that thought, I fell asleep, feeling in control for the first time in a long time. In the morning, I was awakened by a phone call. It was Hugo, informing me that he was coming to see me in the afternoon on important business. I told him I would be at a book club meeting, but my son insisted that it was urgent and he would wait until I returned. As I hung up the phone, I frowned. What could be so urgent? Hugo usually preferred to come on weekends. I felt a vague unease. What if he wanted to take advantage of my absence to inspect the house or, worse, find and sign some documents on my behalf? He'd never done anything like this before, but lately I'd noticed a strange insistence and nervousness in him. Getting ready for the book club meeting, I checked to make sure my camera was working. The app showed that everything was fine. I mentally thanked Odette again for the gift. Now, if Hugo showed up early and started looking for something, I'd know about it. As I left a note on the kitchen table. I'll be there around 4. Got cookies in a jar. Mom. Hugo hated it when I signed Mom instead of Esther, thinking it was old-fashioned. But I liked to remind him who I was to him, especially now that he seemed to see me as nothing more than a hindrance to his plans. I closed the door and headed toward Gretchen's house, but my thoughts stayed at home in the living room, where a small camera silently monitored the empty room, ready to capture any movement. It had been a week since Odette had set up the camera in my living room. I felt a little uneasy at first, knowing that there was something in the house that was constantly watching what was going on. Sometimes I even caught myself fixing my hair or clothes as I passed a bookshelf, but soon that feeling was replaced by a sense of security. Every morning after drinking my first tea, I would open the app on my phone and check the night's entries. Usually it was an empty room, illuminated by the moonlight filtering through the curtains. Occasionally, you could see my old cat Percival strolling around the living room, hunting invisible mice. No big deal, but I liked the very possibility of control. On Monday, I decided to test the camera when I left the house. Odette explained that the motion sensors activate the recording if something happens in the camera's field of view. I got ready for my usual walk, purposely walking through the living room and waving my hand toward the bookshelf as if saying goodbye to an invisible watcher. When I got home an hour later, the first thing I did was check the app. There was indeed a recording of me entering the room, waving and leaving. The room would then remain empty until I returned. The system worked flawlessly. On Tuesday, Odette came in during my absence. I knew this because she had warned me in advance that she would drop off the books I had requested. The tape showed her coming in with a bag, placing it on the table, and looking around as if making sure everything was in order. Then she walked over to the camera, waved and smiled, obviously for me, knowing I would be watching the tape. That little gesture touched me to the core. How lucky I am to have a granddaughter. Unlike Hugo and Sylvia, Odette really cared about my well-being, not my house or inheritance. She would often stop by my house after college, bringing fresh baked goods from the student bakery and talking about her classes. We could sit on the porch for hours, me with my knitting in my hands, her with her laptop in her lap, each busy doing her own thing but enjoying each other's company. Wednesday night, while looking through old photo albums, I came across images from Ernest and I's wedding. 52 years ago. Seemed like an eternity ago. In one of the photos, Ernest was holding me by the waist, both of us laughing, looking somewhere outside the frame. I don't remember what made us laugh so hard, but I remember that feeling of absolute happiness. Ernest wasn't just my husband, he was my best friend. We met in college, in an English literature course. We both took more out of love of reading than out of necessity. He was a tall, skinny guy with a mop of unruly brown hair and a wide smile. He argued with professors, quoted whole pages from Shakespeare and Dickens by heart, and could talk for hours about books he liked. We got married right after graduation. Neither he nor I had serious career plans. Ernest wanted to write novels. I dreamed of teaching literature. In the end, life turned out differently. He got a job at the local newspaper. I became an English teacher at Crown Point High School. But our common passion has always been books. The idea to open our own store came about by accident while on vacation in New England. We wandered into a small bookstore in a seaside town and fell in love with the atmosphere. The owner was an elderly gentleman who was about to retire. We sat all evening over a bottle of wine, discussing how we would run such a place ourselves. When we returned home, we discovered that the former hardware store building in downtown Crown Point was for sale. "That's a sign," Ernest said then, and we ventured out. For the next 30 years, the Pages was the center of our lives. The store never brought in much revenue, but we didn't complain. It was a place where literature lovers from all over the city gathered, where readings and discussions were held, where parents brought their children for Saturday story hours. Ernest personally selected books for regular customers, knowing their tastes and preferences. I did the bookkeeping and organized events. When we had Hugo, he practically lived in the store for the first few years. I set up a toy corner for him behind the counter where he could play while we worked. Later, he would help set up books and serve customers. He seemed to have inherited our love of literature. But as he got older, his interests changed. He chose a career in real estate, which always made Ernest a little sad, although he never showed it to his son. When Hugo had Odette, Ernest and I were over the moon. We often took her to our house on weekends, read books to her, took her to the park. Ernest made a special shelf for her at the store with books he thought every child should read before they grew up. On each of her birthdays, he added a new book to the collection. I sighed, closing the album. How proud Ernest would be of Odette now. She had grown up to be a smart, kind, and independent girl, even though Hugo and Sylvia had never taken much interest in her hobbies. Ernest always said she had a spark in her that needed to be cherished and nurtured. Thursday morning, I got a text from Hugo that he and Sylvia were going to stop by on Saturday. "There's important news, Mom," he wrote. Those words made me wary. Usually big news, as he put it, meant another push for me to move. I decided to prepare for their visit. I baked apple pie, Hugo's favorite dessert since childhood, though in recent years he'd always refused, citing diet. She put the house in perfect order so that Sylvia would have no reason to criticize, and, of course, checked the camera. It worked perfectly. Friday passed in the usual routine. I visited my book club, went to the grocery store, watered the flowers in the backyard. In the evening, Odette called to tell me about Hugo and Sylvia's upcoming visit. "Do you want me to come too?" she suggested. "No, honey," I said. "I can manage on my own. Besides, you said you had some important project on Saturday." "I can postpone it," she insisted. "You don't have to." I tried to sound confident. "If anything goes wrong, I'll call you." We talked some more and I said goodnight. After we talked, I felt a strange uneasiness. What if Hugo and Sylvia were serious about making me move? What if they came with some paperwork or a lawyer? I suddenly realized that I needed support. Saturday morning, I called my longtime friend Eleanor. We had met back in the days when I worked at the school, and she was the school librarian. Now we shared not only common memories, but also similar problems with children who think they know best how to live our lives. "Nora, would you mind stopping by my house today?" I asked. "Hugo and his wife are coming, and I have a bad feeling about it." "Of course, darling," she said. "I was just on my way downtown. I can stop by around 3. "They'll be here at 2, I said. "If you don't hear from me in an hour that everything's all right, come." Eleanor nodded understandingly. "It's a deal. Stay there." At exactly 2 o'clock, I heard the sound of a car pulling up. I looked out the window and saw Hugo's silver sedan parked at the curb. My son got out first, opening the door for Sylvia. They talked briefly about something, then headed toward the house. I opened the door before they could ring the bell. Hello, Mom. Hugo kissed me on the cheek. He smelled like expensive cologne. Hello, Esther, Sylvia said with a strained smile. She never called me Mom, not even in the early years of their marriage, always only by first name, as if to emphasize the distance between us. Come on in. I stepped back, letting them into the house. I've made tea and cake. We just had lunch, Sylvia said quickly, but Hugo interrupted her. The pie sounds great, Mom. I haven't had your pastries in a long time. We walked through to the living room. I noticed Sylvia's gaze sliding around the room, lingering on the antique clock I'd gotten from my mother, the antique secretary, and the collection of porcelain figurines. She'd always taken an unnatural interest in the valuable things in my house. How's Odette doing? I asked, pouring tea. I hadn't seen her in a while. That was a little lie. Odette had stopped by the day before yesterday, but I didn't want Hugo to know how often we saw each other. Okay, Hugo shrugged. All studying as usual. We don't see her much ourselves. She's very busy this semester, Sylvia added. So many projects, so much work. I nodded, not wanting to pursue the subject. We all knew that Odette avoided spending time at home not because of her studies, but because of her strained relationship with her parents. After a few minutes of awkward small talk, Hugo set his cup aside and straightened up. Mom, we're here to talk about a serious matter. Here it was. I tensed inwardly, but tried to keep my expression calm. I'm listening, I said, sipping my tea. Hugo and Sylvia exchanged glances as if deciding who would begin. Finally, Hugo coughed. Sylvia and I have discussed your situation at length, and we've come to the conclusion that you shouldn't live alone in a house this big anymore. My situation is perfectly all right, I retorted. And the house isn't that big. Mom, be reasonable. Hugo frowned. You're 73. What if you fall? What if there's a fire or a burst pipe? Who's going to help you? I have neighbors. I have a telephone. And a head on my shoulders, too, by the way. I felt the irritation rising in me. It's not just about safety, Sylvia intervened. Keeping the house is expensive. The heating, the roof repairs last year. It could all be used to provide a comfortable life in a good boarding house. Oh, that's it. Money. Always money. I manage my expenses just fine, I said coldly. Ernest's pension and my own are more than enough, plus the interest from the sale of the store. But it's irrational, Sylvia persisted. Why spend all the money on a house when you could? It's my house, I interrupted. Ernest and I bought it 40 years ago. Every corner of it holds a memory. I'm not going anywhere. Hugo sighed. Mom, listen to me. We found a great place. Cedar Hills is a new senior citizen complex. Everyone has their own apartment, but there's medical staff, a communal dining room, even a gym and pool. And it's only a 20-minute drive from our house. We'll be able to visit you more often. I don't need pools and gyms, I said, and you can visit me here if you want to. There was an awkward pause. Sylvia fixed her hair nervously, while Hugo drummed his fingers on his knee. There's something else, Hugo said at last. I've been promoted. They're moving us to the head office in Chicago. We'll live an hour away, if anything happens to you. Congratulations on the promotion, I said sincerely, but it doesn't change my mind. I'm staying in my house. But we'll have more opportunities in Chicago, Sylvia exclaimed. Better schools for Odette, career prospects for Hugo. Odette goes to college here at Crown Point, I reminded her. And as far as I know, she's not transferring. It's only temporary, Sylvia said. She might find something better in Chicago. I didn't say anything. We all knew that Odette had chosen the community college not for lack of other options, but because she didn't want to leave me. Anyway, Mom, Hugo returned to the subject. We want you to seriously consider moving. Cedar Hills isn't a nursing home, it's a state of the art facility for active seniors. I'll think about it, I said, knowing I wouldn't change my mind. Great, Hugo glowed. I have the brochures and pre application forms with me. Let me show you how it all works. He pulled a file folder out of his briefcase and began laying out the glossy brochures on the coffee table. I listened, half listening, looking at the pictures of sterile rooms with faceless furniture and artificial plants. Nothing in common with my cozy home, full of memories and warmth. Sylvia got up and started walking around the room, ostensibly looking at the pictures on the walls, but I noticed her gaze lingering on the bookshelf where the camera was hidden. For a moment, my heart sank. What if she noticed the small lens hidden among the books? But Sylvia walked past, stopping at the window overlooking the garden. You know, Esther, she said without turning round, the garden needs work, too. It's looking a bit neglected. That's another worry you could get rid of. I gritted my teeth. My garden was in perfect order. This was just another attempt to make me feel unable to cope on my own. I'm coping with the garden, I said. And the house, too. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to rest. I've had a busy day today. Hugo looked disappointed, but he didn't argue. He collected the brochures and returned them to his briefcase, leaving one on the table. Just think about it, okay? He asked. We only want what's best for you. I nodded, not wanting to start another argument. They said their goodbyes and left, not lingering longer than necessary. Through the window, I watched them get into the car. Sylvia was saying something fervently, waving her arms. Hugo looked depressed. When the car disappeared around the corner, I went back into the living room and sat in my chair, looking at the glossy brochure my son had left behind. Cedar Hills is your new home, the headline read. I shook my head. My home is here, and I'm not going anywhere. I reached for my phone and texted Eleanor that everything was fine and she didn't need to come over. Then I opened the camera app and watched the recording of the meeting. The camera captured our entire conversation perfectly, including Sylvia's disapproving glances wandering around the room. Neither Hugo nor Sylvia even realized that their every word and movement was being recorded. I turned off the app with a sense of strange satisfaction. Whatever they were planning, I now had eyes and ears even when I wasn't home. And I was sure that this protection would still come in handy in the near future. After Hugo and Sylvia's visit, I felt squeezed like a lemon. Talking about moving every time took more energy than I was willing to admit. I guess that was what they were counting on, to wear me down until I gave in. I made myself a cup of strong mint tea and sat down in my favorite chair by the fireplace. It was starting to rain outside the window, large drops drumming against the glass. It was good that Hugo and Sylvia had left before it started. Now I wouldn't have to listen to comments about how dangerous it was for me to go out in bad weather and how convenient it would be to live in a place with covered passages between buildings. The sound of a phone notification interrupted my thoughts. A message from Odette. How did it go? Parents are home by now, but they won't say anything. Sounds suspicious. I smiled, imagining my granddaughter questioning her parents about visiting me. Same old, I typed back. More talk of moving to a paradisiacal place called Cedar Hills. Odette answered almost instantly. There's that Hills thing again. Did they mention moving to Chicago? I frowned. Yeah, Hugo said he got a promotion. They didn't tell me anything. I don't want to move. I have college and all my projects here. Can I come over tomorrow? Sure, honey. I'll be waiting. Putting the phone down, I wondered. Why hadn't Hugo and Sylvia discussed such an important decision with their daughter? Maybe they knew Odette would be against it. Or, what if they planned to move without her? Leave her at college and settle down in Chicago with a new job and without a burdensome elderly mother demanding attention. The more I thought about it, the more suspicious their behavior seemed. I decided to take another look at the security footage. Maybe I had missed something important in their words or behavior. Opening the app on my phone, I found today's footage and turned on the playback. Here we are sitting in the living room, talking about moving. Nothing new. I fast forwarded to the moment they left. The car pulled away. And then I noticed something that made me go cold. About 10 minutes after they left, while I was in the kitchen making tea, the front door opened again. Hugo was back, but not alone. With him was a tall, thin man in a gray suit, briefcase in hand. I recognized him, Reginald Thorpe, the family lawyer who had handled our affairs while Ernest was still alive. What is Thorpe doing in my house? And why did Hugo sneak back without calling me? The tape showed them entering the living room. Hugo looked around, obviously checking to see if I was around. Then he gestured for Thorpe to sit down, and then he took a seat next to him. "She's in the kitchen," Hugo said quietly. "We have a few minutes." Thorpe nodded and opened his briefcase. "I've been through the files," he said. "Everything's generally in order, but we'll need her signature on 2 forms. This one is for medical clearance, and this one is for prior consent to the transfer of financial management." Hugo took the papers and looked them over quickly. "Do you think she'll sign?" Thorpe pressed his lips together. "From what you've told me, I don't think she will. But there are options." "What are they?" The lawyer leaned closer, and I turned the volume up to maximum so I could hear better. "First, we could try an approach through her doctor. Dr. Mitchell, isn't it? If he attests to the beginning signs of dementia or other cognitive impairment, we can initiate proceedings to declare her partially financially incapacitated." I choked with indignation. Dementia? Me? I can do the New York Times crossword puzzle faster than my son. Dr. Mitchell would never agree to that. He's known me for 30 years and has always remarked on my mental clarity. "And if it doesn't work?" Hugo asked. Thorpe shrugged his shoulders. "There are other ways. We can document instances where she forgets something important, loses things, gets confused about time. A few testimonies like that from different people, and the court might take our side." "That would take a long time." Hugo frowned. "And we need to settle this before we move to Chicago." "What about her granddaughter?" Thorpe asked. "What's her? Odette? Could she help?" Hugo shook his head. "I don't think so. They're too close. Odette's always on her grandmother's side." "Too bad." Thorpe sighed. "The testimony of a close relative would have been very useful." At that moment, Sylvia appeared on the tape. She came into the room, carefully closing the door behind her. "All clear," she said. "She's in the backyard, talking on the phone, probably with that friend of hers, Eleanor." I remembered that I had actually gone out to call Eleanor to cancel her visit, but I was sure that Hugo and Sylvia had already left by then. Turns out they only pretended to leave and then came back with Thorpe. "What about the papers?" Sylvia asked, coming closer. "We're discussing our options," Hugo replied. "Thorpe thinks we can try through a doctor or collect evidence of her forgetfulness." Sylvia pressed her lips together. "That would be time-consuming and unreliable. What about the option we discussed?" Hugo and Thorpe exchanged glances. "It's risky," said the lawyer. "Forging a signature is a felony." "Who's talking about forging?" Sylvia snorted. "That's not what I meant. You can make her sign without her realizing what she's signing, like under the guise of insurance papers or something." I felt the blood run cold in my veins. They were discussing how to trick me into signing papers that would take away my control over my own life. "I don't know," Hugo said. "It's risky, too. Mom's not stupid. She might want to read everything." "Then we'll make sure she doesn't have time to read it," Sylvia insisted. "We'll bring the papers when she's going out or when she's busy. We'll say it's urgent and just a formality." Thorpe tapped his fingers thoughtfully on his knee. There is another option, he said at last. More radical, but in some cases effective. We could create a situation that would demonstrate her inability to take care of herself. What do you mean? Hugo asked. An accident at home, for example. Nothing serious, just something that would require medical intervention and give the impression that she's not coping. Like what? Sylvia sounded genuinely interested. A fall, a small fire in the kitchen, heating problems in winter. Thorpe spoke as if he were discussing the weather forecast, not plans to create a dangerous situation for an elderly woman. I felt myself begin to shake with anger and fear. My own son was discussing how to fake an accident to incapacitate me. I don't know, Reggie. Hugo looked worried. This is too much. Don't be a mumbler, Sylvia said sharply. No one's suggesting that she be seriously harmed. Just create a situation that shows that it's not safe for her to live alone. Exactly, Thorpe nodded. And remember what's at stake. The house is worth at least $400,000, plus her investments and savings, all of which can help you with moving to Chicago and paying for Odette's college. So that's what this is about. They need my money for their own agenda, and they're willing to declare me incompetent to get control of my finances. Okay, Hugo finally said. Let's try the documents first. We'll bring them next time and try to get her to sign them without reading them. If that doesn't work, then we'll think of other options. Thorpe nodded and began to gather the papers back into the briefcase. Just act fast. The longer you stall, the more chance she'll suspect something or find her own lawyer. She mentioned that she wants to show some documents to a lawyer she knows, Hugo said. To whom exactly? Thorpe asked quickly. I don't know. She didn't specify. Maybe she was bluffing. Find out, Thorpe insisted. We need to know who we're dealing with. Sylvia, standing at the window, suddenly tensed. She's coming back, she said. Finish up and go out the back door. The men rose quickly. Thorpe snapped his briefcase shut, and all three hurried toward the room's exit. That was the end of the tape. I sat frozen in my chair, unable to move from shock and horror. My own son, my own flesh and blood, was planning to strip me of my independence, my home, my funds, everything I had. And for what? For money to move to Chicago and some projects of his own. I remembered how Hugo had been afraid of thunderstorms as a child and had come to Ernest and me in our bedroom, how I used to hold his little hand in mine while he fell asleep, how I taught him to read, how I took him to school, how proud I was of his first successes. How had that loving boy turned into this cold, calculating man? I didn't know how long I sat like that, immersed in bitter thoughts. I was brought out of my daze by the ringing of the phone. An unfamiliar number. Usually I don't answer such calls, but this time, still in shock, I pressed the receiver button. I'm listening, I said. There was silence for a few seconds. Then a low, husky voice, clearly altered by some device. Stop watching the tapes, Esther. You'll regret it. I froze, gripping the phone tighter. Who is it? I asked, trying to keep my voice from shaking. It doesn't matter, the voice answered. What matters is that you saw something you shouldn't have seen. Turn off the camera and forget everything you heard. It's in your best interest. Hugo? I asked, even though I was sure it wasn't him. The voice was too unnatural, too threatening. A short laugh. Don't complicate things, old girl. Just do as I say. Turn off the camera, delete the tapes, and we'll forget about this incident. And if I don't? My voice strengthened. Instead of fear, I began to feel anger. Whoever it was had threatened me in my own home. Then the consequences will be unpleasant, the voice replied. You have an hour to think about it. If the camera isn't turned off by then, you'll be in for a surprise. And don't call the police. It will only make things worse. The call was cut off. I slowly put the phone down. Who would know about the camera? Hugo and Sylvia certainly didn't. They wouldn't have discussed their plans so openly if they suspected they were being recorded. Odette? No, that's absurd. She set up the camera herself for my safety. Thorpe? That's unlikely. He's a lawyer, not a surveillance expert. Besides, if he knew about the tape, he would have warned Hugo. Someone else? Someone who somehow knew about the camera and didn't want me to see the tape? I decided to check again. I opened the app and started watching the tape from the beginning of Hugo and Sylvia's visit. Maybe I had missed something. Maybe someone else had come to the house. And then I noticed something I had missed the first time. As Sylvia walked around the room looking at the photographs, she lingered for a moment by the bookshelf. Her hand went up to one of the books, the very one behind which the camera was hidden. She didn't pull the book out, just ran her fingers along the spine, but there was something deliberate, like she knew exactly what was in there. Had Sylvia discovered the camera? But then why had she and Hugo gone back to openly discussing their plans? It didn't make sense. I continued to watch the tape, scrutinizing every detail. And then I saw something else strange. As Thorpe entered the room, his gaze lingered for a moment on the bookshelf. Was it a coincidence? Or did he know about the camera, too? And then it hit me. What if it was an act? What if they had staged this conversation for the camera on purpose to scare me? To make me believe that my son was planning something horrible so that I would agree to the move myself, wanting to avoid an accident? But that seemed too complicated, too convoluted a plan. Besides, how would they know about the camera? Odette swore she hadn't told her parents. I shook my head, pushing the paranoid thoughts away. No, most likely they really didn't know about the recording, and the conversation was real. And the call could have come from anyone. Maybe there were some other tracking devices installed in the house, or someone overheard me talking to Odette about the camera. I've decided not to give in to threats. If someone's trying to intimidate me, then these tapes are important. They could be my defense against the plans of Hugo and his accomplices. I continued looking at the tape, hoping to find some more clues, and then I heard a sound, not from the phone, but from the hallway, a sound that sent a chill down my spine. Someone was trying to open the front door. I heard the quiet scrape of metal against metal, the sound of a lockpick being turned. Someone was trying to break into my house. I froze, not knowing what to do. Call the police? But they'd be too late. Yell? But the neighbors wouldn't hear through the closed windows and the sound of the rain. The scratching stopped, and for a moment I thought I had imagined it. But then there was a new sound, a low scraping sound, as if someone were trying to pry at the door frame with something thin and metallic. It wasn't Hugo, he had a key. And it wasn't Odette, she always called before she came in. Someone else was trying to break into my house, someone who was probably the anonymous caller. I got up quietly from my chair, trying not to make a sound. My cane was by the fireplace. I picked it up, gripping it tightly in my hand. It wasn't a goddamn weapon, but it was better than nothing. First, I had to make sure the door was secure. I had good locks. Ernest was always concerned about security, but if the intruder was a professional, they might not save the day. I tiptoed to the door connecting the living room to the hallway and peered out cautiously. In the dim light coming through the small window next to the front door, I saw a shadow. Someone was indeed standing on the porch, leaning against the lock. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like it was about to jump out of my chest. What do? Call Odette, Eleanor, the police. And that's when I heard the click. The lock had given way. When I heard the lock click, I felt a cold fear gripping me. The front door slowly began to open, letting in a streak of gray, rainy light. Acting purely on instinct, I retreated into the living room, grabbed my phone, and rushed to the back of the house. I needed a place to lock myself in and call the police. I chose the bathroom, the only room on the first floor with a solid lock. Running inside, I quietly closed the door and turned the latch. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. Who should I call? The police? Yeah, sure, but until they get here. In our small town, the nearest patrol could be dozens of minutes away. I needed someone to come right away. And then I thought of Lyle Haddock, my neighbor 2 doors down. A retired police officer, he had moved to Crown Point 5 years ago and had quickly become the unspoken protector of our street. A tall, sturdy man with a military bearing, he often went around the neighborhood, checking to make sure everything was okay. We weren't close friends, but we'd occasionally exchange a few words when I was working in the garden and he was walking his German shepherd. I found his number in my contacts and pressed call, praying he was home. After the third ring, I heard his husky voice. Haddock here. Lyle, it's Esther Bellows, your neighbor, I whispered, trying to keep my voice as low as possible. Someone cracked my door and came into the house. I locked myself in the bathroom. A short pause hung on the other end of the line. Stay there, Mrs. Bellows. His voice instantly became collected and clear. I'll be there in 2 minutes. Have you called the police yet? No, I called you first. I'll call them on the way. Do not open the door until you hear my voice. Do you understand? Yes, I whispered, feeling incredibly relieved that someone was in control. And another thing, Lyle added, is there anything in your bathroom that can be used as a weapon? Just in case. I looked around. A heavy metal towel holder, a ceramic vase on a shelf, a bottle of hairspray. There's something, I said. Good. Keep it handy. I'm on my way out. The call ended, and I was alone in the silence of the bathroom. Outside, there were barely audible sounds. Footsteps on the wooden floor, creaking floorboards, the quiet rustle of someone methodically searching my house. I took the metal towel holder off the wall, a heavy chrome tube that would make a good baton. I grabbed a bottle of hairspray off the shelf. If I sprayed it in my eyes, it would give me a few seconds head start. Footsteps were getting closer. Someone was walking down the hall toward the bathroom. I froze, trying not to even breathe. The doorknob turned slightly. Someone was checking to see if it was locked. I gripped my makeshift weapons tighter. Mrs. Bellows? A voice came from behind the door, quiet but insistent. Not Lyle's, definitely not. The voice was younger, with a slight accent I couldn't identify. I know you're in there. We need to talk. I didn't answer, continuing to stand motionless. It's about the tape you saw, the voice continued, and about your son. You're in danger, Mrs. Bellows, but not from me. I'm here to help. This could have been a trap. The same man who threatened me on the phone is now trying to lure me out of hiding. Leave or I'll call the police, I finally said, trying to make my voice sound more confident than I felt. They're on their way, the voice replied calmly. So is your neighbor, Mr. Haddock. We don't have much time. I need you to know not to trust Lawyer Thorpe. He's not who he says he is. I heard the sound of an approaching siren, distant but distinct. The police were indeed on their way. I'll leave something for you, the voice said quickly. Look under the third rung of the stairs. There's a cavity there. And be careful with, he didn't get a chance to finish. From outside came a loud knock at the door, and Lyle Haddock's high-pitched voice. Police! Open the door. Although Lyle was no longer a policeman, it sounded very convincing. I heard quick footsteps as the stranger ran away from the bathroom door. Then the sound of breaking glass. I think he jumped out the window at the back of the house. A few seconds later, I heard heavy footsteps in the hallway and Lyle's familiar voice. Mrs. Bellows, are you in there? It's Haddock. Yes, I answered, still shivering. Is he gone? I think so. He jumped out the back window. Can you open it? I carefully turned the latch and opened the door. Standing in front of me was Lyle Haddock, a 65-year-old stout man with gray hair, dressed in a jacket and jeans. In his right hand, he held a gun. I didn't realize he had a gun. Are you okay? He asked, quickly examining me with his gaze. Yeah, just scared, I replied, walking out of the bathroom. He was saying weird things about my son and some lawyer. Lyle frowned. Let's check the house first. Make sure he's really gone and no one else is here. We walked around the entire first floor. The front door was ajar. The lock had obviously been picked professionally, without much damage. In the study, desk drawers were pulled out, papers scattered. The living room was untouched. The kitchen window had been smashed. The burglar had escaped through it. The police will be here in a few minutes, Lyle said, holstering his gun under his jacket. I called them right after you called. I nodded, still feeling out of place. The stranger's words wouldn't come out of my head. Don't trust Lawyer Thorpe. He's not who he says he is. Lyle, I said when we got back to the living room, I need to show you something. Before the police get here. What is it? The tape. The surveillance tape my granddaughter installed in the house. His eyebrows went up. You have a security camera? That's good. Maybe it captured the burglar. No, not that. I shook my head. I mean, maybe that too, but I want to show you a tape from earlier today of my son and his wife visiting. Lyle looked puzzled, but nodded. Okay, let's take a look. I pulled out my phone and opened the app. Luckily, the camera was still working. The intruder either didn't know about it or hadn't had time to find it and disable it. I turned on the footage from when Hugo and Sylvia returned with Thorpe and handed the phone to Lyle. He watched the video intently, his face growing more somber as he watched. When the tape ended, he looked up at me. Are your son and that lawyer planning to incapacitate you? He asked. Looks like it, I sighed. And after watching that tape, I received an anonymous call threatening me to stop watching the tapes. And then I pointed to the broken door. This happened. Do you think the caller and the burglar are the same person? I don't know, I answered honestly. Maybe. But the voice on the phone was changed, and the voice of the man who spoke to me through the bathroom door sounded different, younger. Lyle rubbed his chin thoughtfully. What exactly did the intruder say? Do you remember what he said? I tried to recite everything I'd heard. The warning about Thorpe. The mention of the hiding place under the stairs. Lyle listened without interrupting. Interesting, he said when I was done. It doesn't sound like the usual burglar. This man came for a specific purpose, either to warn you or to find something specific. There was the sound of a car and flashing lights outside. The police had arrived. Don't tell them about the tape with your son yet, Lyle said quickly. We'll deal with the break-in first. If they ask about the camera, tell them there's one, but don't mention the previous footage. I nodded, though I wasn't quite sure why it was necessary to keep that information from the police. You don't trust them? Lyle shook his head. It's not a matter of trust. It's just that if powerful people are involved, your son works in real estate, right? The lawyer's not the last man in town either, by the looks of it. We better figure out who's who before we press charges. There was a knock at the door and a voice announced, Crown Point Police! Open up, please! The next hour was spent talking to two police officers, a young patrolman named Daniel Reed and a more experienced female sergeant named Consuelo Martinez. They inspected the scene of the break-in, photographed the damage, and recorded my statement about what had happened. I told them that I heard the sounds of the break-in, hid in the bathroom, and called a neighbor, but I kept quiet about the previous events and the recording with Hugo. Do you have security cameras, Mrs. Bellows? Sergeant Martinez asked, looking around the living room. Yes, one, I pointed to the bookshelf. My granddaughter installed it recently. For my safety. Did it catch the intruder? I don't know. I haven't checked yet. I lied, feeling awkward. It all happened so fast. We'd like a copy of the tape, Martinez said. It would help with the investigation. Of course, I nodded. My granddaughter will help me with that. She's very tech savvy. Do you have a place to sleep tonight? Officer Reed asked. The door will need to be repaired, and in the meantime, the house isn't secure. I hesitated. The thought of leaving my home was unpleasant. Where would I go? To Hugo's? After what I'd learned, that was impossible. She can stay at my place, Lyle interjected. I have a guest bedroom, and I'll have my friend Tom, who's a carpenter, do the door tomorrow morning. I looked at him gratefully. Eleanor would have offered me a bed for the night, too, but she lived alone, and it would be difficult for her to protect us in case of further trouble. The cops finished their inspection, left me a business card with a number to contact, and left, promising to patrol the neighborhood throughout the night. I packed the necessary things for the night, but before I left, Lyle and I decided to check out the stash the burglar had mentioned. The third rung of the staircase leading to the second floor did creak slightly and didn't seem as sturdy as the others. Lyle pressed it gently, and the step gave way. There's something here, he said, slipping his fingers into the gap and lifting the wooden panel. In the cavity beneath the step was a small, heavy paper bag. Lyle pulled it out and handed it to me. Inside was a flash drive and a piece of paper with printed text. Everything you need to know about RT and Operation Cedar Hills. Trust no one but LH. LH is me? Lyle wondered, looking at the note. Lyle Haddock. I nodded. Looks like someone knew I'd come to you for help. Or counted on it, he said thoughtfully. What was Operation Cedar Hills? I explained that Cedar Hills was the name of the senior center where Hugo and Sylvia had tried so hard to put me. Very strange. Lyle shook his head. Let's see what's on the flash drive, but not here. It'll be safer at my house. We walked out the back door, skirting the broken window in the kitchen. Lyle helped me temporarily board it up with some plywood I found in the shed. Then we walked through my backyard and the neighbor's yard to Lyle's house, a neat one-story structure with a wide porch. Inside, we were greeted by Max, a German shepherd, a big dog with intelligent eyes, who immediately came up to sniff me and then laid down at his master's feet, obviously pleased to see him back. Make yourself comfortable. Lyle pointed to a comfortable chair in the living room. I'll get my laptop and see what's on the flash drive. While he went to get the computer, I looked around. Lyle's house was simple but tasteful. A few pictures on the walls, one of him in a police uniform, others of him with some woman and children, apparently a family. Bookshelves with detectives and historical novels, all clean, neat, no frills. Lyle came back with a laptop, sat down next to it, and plugged a thumb drive into the USB port. Let's see what we've got here, he muttered as he opened the contents. There were several folders with documents and one video on the flash drive. The first folder contained information about the Cedar Hills project, not advertising materials, but internal documents of the developer. Judging by them, the complex wasn't exactly what was advertised in the brochures. Look, Lyle pointed to the screen. This says Phase 2 of the project. Once the complex is filled, there are plans to substantially increase fees for maintenance and medical services. In fact, people will be forced to either pay triple the cost or look elsewhere. I have reviewed the documents. Indeed, the plan called for attractive prices initially, and then, after seniors sold their homes and moved into the complex, a steep increase in fees. It's a real scam, I said indignantly. They lure people in, and then they put them in front of the fact. Exactly, Lyle nodded. And look who's on the list of investors in the project. He opened another document, and I saw a list of names. Among them were Reginald Thorpe and Hugo Bellows. My son invested in this project? I couldn't believe my eyes. But from where? He doesn't have that kind of money. Lyle opened another folder containing financial documents. Here, he pointed to a line in the spreadsheet. A loan against future earnings. Basically, your son took out a loan, expecting to repay it with money from the sale of your house or, he hesitated, or from managing my finances after I was declared incapacitated. I finished for him. That's what they were talking about on the tape. The more we studied the documents, the clearer the picture became. Cedar Hills was not just an apartment complex, but part of a larger scam targeting seniors with property. The scheme was simple: convince the elderly to sell their homes and move into the complex. Then, after they lost their homes and the opportunity to return, raise the prices to impossible levels. Who else is on the list of investors? I asked, looking at the names. Mostly local businessmen, Lyle answered, flipping through the document. Here, look, there are notes on some of the names. Next to Thorpe's name was a note: Legal Support Coordinator, responsible for documentation of incapacity. Next to Hugo's name, Real Estate Agent, responsible for appraising and selling properties. And next to another name, Victor Mendez, was a note: Security, confidentiality, and troubleshooting. Troubleshooting, Lyle repeated. Sounds ominous. You think he's the one who tried to break into my house? Maybe, but then who left the flash drive? And who warned you about Thorpe? We opened the video file on the flash drive. It was a recording of a conversation in an office somewhere. Thorpe was sitting at a desk. Across from him was a young man with dark hair and dark skin. I don't agree with the methods, the young man was saying. This is crossing all boundaries. One thing is legitimate business activity, but another is outright fraud and intimidation of the elderly. Nobody's asking you, Ramon, Thorpe said. You don't get paid for moral evaluations. You get paid for results. I need signed documents and a guarantee that the old people will not cause problems after the move. What if they refuse to move? If they start asking questions? Thorpe grinned. That's what we have Victor for. He knows how to be persuasive. The tape ended. Lyle and I looked at each other. It's proof, he said. Proof that Thorpe and his team are using illegal methods. But who made the tape, and why did he give it to me? Probably that young man, Ramon. He's obviously not happy about what's going on. Maybe he wanted to expose them. I remembered the burglar's voice, young, with a slight accent. It could indeed be the Ramon from the video. What do we do now? I asked. Go to the police? Lyle thought for a moment. With this evidence, yes, but we have to be careful. If Thorpe and this Victor guy are as unscrupulous as they seem, they could be dangerous. Plus, if the scheme involves powerful people in the city, not everyone on the police force might be on our side. I sighed. The situation was getting more and more complicated and dangerous. I think we need additional protection, Lyle said after a pause. First, we'll install a real alarm system and additional cameras in your house. Second, we'll make copies of all those documents and videos, storing them in different places. Third, I'll contact a couple of reliable people from the state police. They're not affiliated with the local authorities. I nodded, grateful for his help and rational approach. What about Hugo? I asked, feeling hurt at the thought of betraying my son. He's my son. How could he? Lyle put his hand on my shoulder. Maybe he doesn't know the whole picture. Maybe Thorpe and the others are using him, knowing his financial difficulties. Don't jump to conclusions. I wanted to believe it, but the tape of Hugo's conversation with Thorpe left no doubt my son was fully aware of the plan and actively involved. Still, you need to be very careful from now on, Lyle continued. No talking to Hugo about what you know. No signatures on any documents, even if they seem harmless. And make sure you tell your granddaughter about all of this. She needs to know. Odette? I remembered she was coming to see me tomorrow. What if she accidentally tells her parents? Do you trust her? Completely. Then tell her the truth, but emphasize the importance of secrecy. From what you've told me, she's not on the best of terms with her parents. I nodded. Odette really was on my side, and she needed to know the danger. Tomorrow morning, I'll call a friend of mine who does security systems, Lyle said. He'll install a quality alarm system and additional cameras in your house. In the meantime, let's get some rest. It had been a long day. He showed me to the guest bedroom, a small but cozy room with a single bed, a dresser, and a small desk. I laid out my things and got ready for bed, but sleep didn't come. Too many thoughts were swirling around in my head. My own son is involved in a scam targeting the elderly, including me. A lawyer I once trusted turned out to be a fraud. Some mysterious young man is warning me of danger, and I can't feel safe in my own home now. If Ernest were alive, he'd know what to do. He always knew how to solve difficult situations, to find the right path. But Ernest is gone, and I have to do this on my own, with the help of Lyle, Odette, and maybe this mysterious Ramon, if he's really on my side. Tomorrow I'd have to beef up security at the house, talk to Odette, and decide how to proceed. I woke up this morning with a clear plan of action. It had been a restless night in Lyle's guest bedroom, waking from nightmares of Hugo and Thorpe chasing me through the endless corridors of Cedar Hills. But by dawn, the disturbing dreams had receded, and determination took their place. I wasn't going to be a victim. At breakfast, Lyle said his friend, the security systems specialist, would be here by 11. Tom the carpenter had already replaced the lock on the front door and fixed the broken window in the kitchen. Tom left you 2 sets of keys, Lyle said, handing me a set. One for you and one for Odette. Don't give the keys to anyone else, not even Hugo. Especially Hugo, I said grimly, accepting the keys. I also called a former colleague of mine from the state police, Lyle continued. His name is Gordon Riley, and he works in the fraud squad. He's coming down tomorrow to review the paperwork. If everything checks out, the case will be put under special scrutiny. I nodded gratefully. Lyle's support was invaluable, but I knew I needed legal protection too. Do you know a good lawyer? I asked. Someone who specialized in elder law and wasn't connected to Thorpe. Lyle thought about it. There's this woman lawyer, Cora Winters. She used to work for the DA's office, and now she's in private practice. She's very principled and isn't afraid of conflict with the local bigwigs. I have her card somewhere. He got up and walked over to the secretary against the wall. Digging in the drawer, he pulled out a small card. Here it was. Cora Winters, attorney at law, specializing in civil rights, fraud cases, family law. I took the card. It had an office address in downtown Crown Point and a phone number. I'll call her as soon as I get home, I said. After breakfast, Lyle drove me back. My house looked the same, but the feeling of security I'd always felt in it was gone. I knew now that even locked doors and windows didn't guarantee protection. Odette arrived around 10, anxious and worried. I told her everything about the tape of Hugo and Thorpe's conversation, about the mysterious intruder, about the documents on the flash drive, about the Cedar Hills plan. She listened without interrupting, but her face grew paler and paler. I always knew Mom was mercantile, she said at last. But for Dad, I can't believe it. I can't believe it either, I sighed. But the evidence is overwhelming. Your father is actively involved in this scheme. Odette shook her head, fighting back tears. But why? I mean, they have everything. Good jobs, houses, cars. Maybe it's not as smooth as it looks, I said softly. According to the documents, your father has serious debts. What kind of debts? He never mentioned. I guess that's why he's so desperate to get control of my money and my house. He needs the funds, and urgently. Odette thought for a moment, then her face cleared as if she remembered something. Wait, the other day I overheard my parents talking. Mom was yelling at Dad about some lost money and threatening divorce if he didn't fix the problem. I thought it was work related, but now I put my hand on her shoulder. Odette, I need your help, but you have to realize that this could be dangerous if your parents find out you're on my side. I don't care, she said firmly. I'm with you, Grandma. What do you need to do? For starters, can you find out more about your parents' financial situation? Carefully, without arousing suspicion. Odette nodded. They have a home office. Dad often leaves papers there. I can take a look when they're not home. Just be careful, I warned, and don't tell anyone about our conversations. Soon, Lyle's friend Mike Donovan, a security systems specialist, arrived. He was a tall, sturdy man in his 50s, with calloused hands and a shrewd eye. He took a quick look around the house, assessing vulnerabilities. We'll install sensors on all doors and windows, he said. 3 cameras, one at the front door, one in the backyard, one in the living room, plus a panic button you can carry with you. When you press it, the signal will go directly to the security company and Mr. Haddock's phone. I agreed to everything. The installation cost was considerable, but my safety was worth the money. While Donovan worked, I called Cora Winters. Her secretary at first said the next available appointment wasn't for another 2 weeks. But when I mentioned Lyle Haddock's name and hinted at the urgency of the fraud case, there was suddenly a 3 o'clock window in the schedule. By 2 o'clock, Donovan had finished installing the security system, showed me how to use it, and left. Lyle, who had been watching the work the whole time, offered to drive me to Cora Winters. I'll wait in the car, he said, and after the meeting we could stop by Gordon Rowley's to show him the documents from the flash drive. I'm going too, Odette said. I want to know everything firsthand. The 3 of us headed downtown. Cora Winter's office was in an old red brick building, once a tobacco warehouse, but now a business center. Cora Winters was a short black woman in her 50s, with intelligent eyes and a determined chin. She met us in her spacious office. Mrs. Bellows. She shook my hand firmly. Pleased to meet you. Lyle called me before you came in, gave me a brief outline of the situation. That sounds serious. I spent the next hour detailing the events of the last few days. The camera setup, Hugo and Sylvia's visit, their secret return with Thorpe, the threatening phone call, the break-in, the documents on the flash drive. Cora took notes, occasionally interrupting me with clarifying questions. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair, tapping her pen thoughtfully on her notepad. So, to summarize, your son, his wife, and attorney Reginald Thorpe plan to legally incapacitate you in order to gain control of your finances and property. They need these funds to pay off your son's debts and to participate in the Cedar Hills project, which is documented to be a pyramid scheme. In addition, there is a certain Victor Mendez in charge of fixing problems. Is that correct? Yes, I confirmed. That's correct. Do you have copies of all the documents? Yeah, Odette made them this morning. Here. I handed her an envelope with the printouts and a duplicate flash drive. This is a very serious matter, Mrs. Bellows. There are clear signs of fraud, collusion, and even threats to life and limb. We need to act quickly and decisively. What do you suggest? I asked. First, we need to legally protect you from being declared incompetent. We'll draw up a notarized declaration of your capacity, backed up by a medical examination. Do you know a reliable doctor who could do the examination? I've been thinking. Dr. Mitchell, my internist. I've known him for 30 years. He wouldn't perjure himself against me. Oh, that's great. Make an appointment with him as soon as possible. Secondly, we'll draw up a new will and power of attorney, appointing someone you trust completely as a trustee. How about Odette? I suggested. That's the best option, Cora agreed. She's a direct relative of yours. It'll look more natural. Third, we'll prepare a statement to law enforcement about attempted fraud and threats. But we'll hold off on filing it until we have more evidence. I can look for documents in Dad's office, Odette said. Just be careful, Cora warned. These people could be dangerous. After the meeting with Cora, we stopped by Gordon Riley, Lyle's former colleague from the state police. He promised to conduct an informal investigation and gather information about Cedar Hills and Victor Mendez. That evening, already at home, I got a call from Hugo. Mom, it's me. We need to talk right away. I'll come by tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. It's important. What is it about, Hugo? I asked, trying to sound normal. Not on the phone. Just stay home, okay? Preferably alone. When the conversation was over, Odette and I decided that I would meet Hugo, but Lyle would be nearby. Cameras would record the entire meeting. The next morning, Hugo arrived alone, without Sylvia. He looked exhausted, circles under his eyes, a nervous look, his shirt sloppily buttoned. Mom? He gave me a quick hug and walked into the living room. We need to have a serious talk. I'm listening. I sat down across from him, holding my cell phone with the panic button. I know you were at the lawyer's office yesterday. Cora Winters. I acted surprised. How do you know that? It doesn't matter. What matters is that you're making a mistake. Winters is a notorious scandalizer. What did you say to her? Nothing much. I was just updating my will. Will? Why? Do you have some kind of health problem? No, I'm just getting my affairs in order. What's in this new will? His fingers are white with tension. The usual stuff. House, savings, personal effects. Same as always. All for me? He asked me directly. Who else? You're my only son. Hugo visibly relaxed, but not for long. After a pause, he admitted that he had serious financial problems, debts to the bank and his partners. I need $200,000, he said. You can mortgage the house or take out a loan against it. What is the project you invested in? I asked. It's a senior citizen complex, Cedar Hills. And if I say no? His face changed. Anger flashed in his eyes. Mom, you don't understand. It's not just money. It's about safety, mine and our families. Are you threatening me, Hugo? No, of course not. I'm just explaining the situation. The people I owe, they're not the most patient. I need to think, I said finally. There's no time to think. He jumped up, raising his voice. I need an answer now. Or what? I stood up too, looking him straight in the eye. He looked away and pulled an envelope out of his jacket pocket. Here, he handed me the papers. These are the documents for a loan against the house. All I need is your signature. I took the envelope, but didn't open it. I won't sign anything now. I need to read it carefully. You don't trust me, your only son? It's not about trust. It's about the right approach to financial matters. Hugo took a deep breath, trying to restrain himself. All right, read it. But time is short, very little time. I need your answer by the end of the week. I promised to think about it, knowing I'd never sign those papers. He turned around at the door. One more thing, Mom. Don't go to that Winters woman again. Why not? She's got a bad reputation. For your own good, stay away from her. After he left, I opened the envelope. Inside was indeed the documents for a loan against the house, but the amount was not $200,000, but $500, and among the papers was a power of attorney, authorizing Hugo to handle all my finances. I called Lyle, and he came right over. We went over the paperwork together. A classic fraud. Lyle shook his head. By signing that power of attorney, you'd be effectively giving Hugo control of all your assets. Cora Winters called that evening. She found out that Hugo had hired a private investigator to follow me. Be careful, she warned me. He must be very concerned about what you're doing. The next morning, I got another call from Hugo. Mom, have you decided? I'll be at your place in an hour with the notary. We'll sign the papers. I need more time. I tried to object. There's no time. He cut me off and hung up. I urgently called Lyle. He promised to come and be with me during Hugo's visit. An hour later, the doorbell rang. Hugo stood on the doorstep, and with him stood a thin man with sharp features. Mother, this is Mr. Victor Mendez. Hugo introduced him. He is a notary and will help us with the documents. After Hugo and Mendez's visit, I realized that I could no longer delay decisive action. The time for cat and mouse was over. I had to fight back and protect not only my property, but also my dignity. Lyle, who rushed in on my call a few minutes after they left, had my full support. This Mendez guy isn't even a real notary, he said after reviewing the surveillance footage. I checked with the state's database of licensed notaries public. There's no Victor Mendez. So, not only did they want my signature on questionable documents, but they used a fake notary to do it? I shook my head, trying to comprehend the depth of the betrayal. Exactly, and that's a serious offense. Lyle looked grim. Forgery, fraud, maybe even extortion. Gordon Riley thinks we have enough evidence for a formal investigation. We decided to act quickly. That same day, I visited Dr. Mitchell, who, after a thorough examination, issued me a medical certificate of full legal capacity. With these documents, Odette and I went to Cora Winters. Now we have everything we need for a legal defense, Cora said as she looked through the papers. Medical reports, surveillance tapes, financial records of the Cedar Hills fraud. It's time to go on the offensive. What are you suggesting? I asked. Arrange a meeting with your son, his wife, and their lawyer, Thorpe. Invite them to your house. Tell them you're ready to discuss a loan offer on the house. But what we're really going to do is we're going to surprise them, an unexpected surprise. Cora's plan was bold, but risky. I was to lure Hugo, Sylvia, and Thorpe to my place under the pretense of signing documents, and then, in the presence of Cora, Lyle, and Gordon Riley, reveal to them that I knew about all their machinations. Wouldn't that be dangerous? Odette asked worriedly. What if they tried to, I don't know, hurt Grandma? They wouldn't dare, Cora replied confidently. Not in front of witnesses, including a police officer. Besides, everything will be recorded on cameras. We'll be completely protected. I agreed with the plan. After so many years of caring for others, after all the concessions and compromises, it was time to stand up for myself. I called Hugo that same night. Hugo, it's Mom. I've been thinking about your loan offer. There was a pause on the other end of the line. What did you decide? His voice sounded tense. I agree to sign the papers, I said, trying to make my voice sound convincing. But I want it to be official. Invite Thorpe, and Sylvia too. Come tomorrow at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Tomorrow? Hugo obviously didn't expect such a quick agreement. Okay, but no buts. I tried to keep my voice firm. Tomorrow at 3 o'clock, and bring all the necessary documents. I hung up the phone and took a deep breath. The first step had been taken. Hugo had taken the bait. Now I had to prepare thoroughly for the upcoming meeting. The next morning was spent in preparation. Lyle installed extra cameras in the living room. Cora prepared the legal documents. Gordon Riley provided official police support. Odette stayed with me, refusing to leave even for a minute. I want to be there when you tell them the truth, she insisted. They need to know you're not alone. By 3 o'clock, everything was ready. Cora, Lyle, and Gordon were in the kitchen, where they could quickly go into the living room if necessary. Odette sat next to me on the couch. The cameras were on and running. At exactly 3 o'clock, the doorbell rang. I opened it and saw Hugo, Sylvia, and Reginald Thorpe. Come in, I invited them in, trying to speak calmly. I'm glad you're all here. They entered the living room, and I noticed the surprise on Hugo's face when he saw Odette. What is she doing here? He asked sharply. We were going to discuss family matters. Odette is part of the family, I replied. And what we're going to discuss concerns her, too. Sylvia looked tense, her eyes roaming the room restlessly, as if she were searching for signs of danger. Thorpe, on the other hand, seemed confident and collected. Mrs. Bellows, he stepped forward with a professional smile. Your son tells me you're ready to sign the papers for a loan against the house. I've prepared all the necessary paperwork. He took a folder out of his briefcase and placed it on the coffee table. This is a standard home equity loan agreement. You just need to sign here, here, and here. He pointed to the marked places. After that, the bank will transfer the money to the account specified in the agreement. I took the folder and opened it slowly, pretending to read the documents carefully. And what is the amount of the loan specified in the contract? $450,000, Thorpe answered. That's about 70% of the market value of your house. Very favorable terms. And where will this money go? I continued. Hugo intervened impatiently. Mom, we've already discussed this. Some of it will be used to pay off my debts, and some of it will be used to invest in Cedar Hills. Oh yes, Cedar Hills. I closed the folder and put it back on the table. It's a very interesting project. Tell me more about it, Mr. Thorpe. Thorpe glanced briefly at Hugo, then back at me. It's a premium senior living complex with a full range of services, from independent living to full-time care. A very promising investment. Really? I raised an eyebrow. What about Phase 2? The one where the fees are scheduled to skyrocket after seniors sell their homes and move into the complex. There was silence in the room. Thorpe froze, his smile becoming strained. Hugo turned sharply toward me. What are you talking about? The real Cedar Hills plan? I looked him straight in the eye. A fraudulent scheme to bilk the elderly out of money by forcing them to sell their homes and then putting them on the street or paying exorbitant maintenance fees. Sylvia's face turned pale and she clutched the back of her chair. Where did you? Thorpe began, but I didn't let him finish. I know everything, I said firmly, about your plans to incapacitate me, about the fake notary Victor Mendez, about Hugo's debts to investors, and I have proof. I pressed a button on my phone, and Cora, Lyle, and Gordon Riley walked into the room. What's that supposed to mean? Hugo jumped up, his face contorted with anger. What kind of an act are you putting on? It's not an act, Mr. Bellows, Cora said calmly. I'm Cora Winters, your mother's attorney, and this is Gordon Riley, State Police Officer, Fraud Squad. We have all the evidence of your fraudulent scheme, Gordon added. Internal Cedar Hills documents, tapes of conversations, evidence of attempted forgery of notarized documents. Thorpe quickly closed the briefcase. We'll probably continue this conversation another time, he said, heading for the exit. One more step, Mr. Thorpe, and I'll arrest you for attempted fraud, Gordon warned. I suggest you sit down and listen to what Mrs. Bellows has to say. Thorpe froze, then slowly came back and sat down. I stood up, feeling unusually firm. Decades of fear and uncertainty were suddenly gone. I was standing in front of people who wanted to deceive me, and I felt no fear, not even anger, only determination. I've gathered you here to inform you of a few decisions I've made, I began. First, I will not sign any loan papers against the house. Not today, not ever. Hugo opened his mouth to object, but I raised my hand to stop him. Second, I changed my will. Hugo, you are no longer my heir. All of my assets, including this house, will go into a trust to be administered by Odette. You can't do that, shouted Sylvia. He's your only son. I can, I replied calmly, and I've already done it. The papers are signed and notarized by a real notary. Hugo's face turned crimson with rage. It was her, he pointed at Odette. She turned you against us. She's always been a manipulative little bitch. Don't you dare talk about her like that. I felt the anger rising inside me. Odette is the only person in this room besides me who didn't try to trick me. The only one who actually cared about me and not my money. Mom, you don't understand. Hugo changed tactics, his voice becoming pleading. I'm in a desperate situation. These people I owe, they're not kidding. They threatened me, my family. And that's why you decided to sacrifice your mother? I asked. To rob me of my home, my savings, even my dignity by declaring me incompetent? Hugo lowered his head. I didn't mean for it to happen that way. Thorpe was the one who suggested it. Leave me out of this, Bellows, Thorpe snapped. It was your idea all along. That's enough, Gordon intervened. Mrs. Bellows, do you want to press charges against your son and Mr. Thorpe? I hesitated. I didn't want to see my son behind bars, despite everything he'd done. But I also realized that to forgive him now would be to let him escape responsibility for his actions. Against Thorpe, yes, I finally said. As for Hugo, I'll give him a chance to make amends, provided he fully admits his guilt and stops trying to gain control of my property. Hugo looked up, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. Mom, One more thing, I continued. You have to pay back the money you borrowed from these people in some other way. Sell your house, your car, anything. But leave my house and my property alone. Sylvia jumped up. It's not fair. You can't do this to us. We're your family. Family doesn't try to cheat each other out of property, I replied calmly. A family doesn't threaten, manipulate, lie. What you did is not a family relationship. It's exploitation. Sylvia turned to Hugo. Are you going to put up with this? She disinherited you in favor of this. Shut up, Sylvia, Hugo said tiredly. Just shut up. He turned to me, and for the first time in a long time, I saw something like remorse in his eyes. Mom, I'm sorry. Not for the way things turned out, but for going through with it in the first place. I'm really desperate, but that's no excuse. No, it's no excuse, I agreed. What do you want me to do? First, confess everything to Gordon. I nodded toward the police officer. Tell him all about Cedar Hills, about Mendez, about your plans. If you cooperate, you might be able to avoid jail time. Hugo glanced at Thorpe, who sat with his arms crossed over his chest and a stony expression on his face. All right, he said at last. I'll tell you everything. And then? Sylvia asked. Then what happens? We'll be left with no money, no prospects. Then, I looked her straight in the eye. You'll live your life and I'll live mine. Without you. You're breaking up with your own son? I could hear the disbelief in her voice. No, I shook my head. I'm ending toxic relationships with people who only see me as a source of money. If Hugo ever wants to rebuild a real relationship, not for the inheritance, but for the family bond, my door will be open. But for now, I don't see him as the son I raised. There was a heavy silence in the room. Sylvia looked at me with hatred, Thorpe with cold calculation, and Hugo with a mixture of shame and anger. I think we ought to go, said Thorpe at last. Mr. Bellows, Mrs. Bellows, I suggest that we continue this conversation in a quieter atmosphere, when all emotion— No, I interrupted him. This conversation is over, forever. Gordon, you can take Mr. Thorpe to the stand. Hugo, I'll contact you through Cora when I think I'm ready to talk. For now, I'm going to have to ask you to leave my house. Hugo stood up and took one last look at Odette, who had been sitting next to me the whole time, clutching my hand tightly. Odette, he began, but she shook her head. Don't, Dad. Not now. He nodded, then turned and walked out. Sylvia followed him without a word. Gordon took Thorpe under his arm and led him toward the exit. I'll call you tomorrow, Mrs. Bellows, Cora said. We have a lot of paperwork to do. When everyone had gone, I sank into a chair, suddenly feeling my strength draining away. Odette sat down next to me and put her arm around my shoulders. You were great, Grandma, she whispered. A real fighter. I don't feel like a winner, I said honestly. More like a loser. I lost my son. You didn't lose him today, Lyle said softly, who'd stayed behind to make sure we were okay. You lost him when he decided to put money before family. Today, you simply acknowledged that fact. I nodded, realizing the truth of his words. Hugo had made his choice a long time ago. I just didn't want to see it. What now? Odette asked. How do you feel? I thought about it, listening to how I felt. There was pain, of course, disappointment, bitterness, but there was something else underneath them, a strange, almost forgotten sense of freedom. I feel lighter, I said at last. As if I'd shed a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years. I'm no longer afraid of being tricked, no longer worried about what they're up to behind my back. I'm free. Odette smiled, tears glistening in her eyes. What are you going to do with that freedom? I looked out the window at my garden, which had always been my refuge. Then I shifted my gaze to the bookshelves, filled with stories I loved, to the picture of Ernest, who seemed to be smiling at me from the wall. To live, I answered simply. Just to live, without fear or looking back. At my age, that's the most precious gift of all. Lyle said goodbye, promising to check back tomorrow. Odette and I were left alone in a quiet house that was really just mine now. No threat, no fear, no need to justify my desire to live independently. Are you staying for dinner? I asked my granddaughter. I can make lasagna, the kind you like. I'd love to. Odette kissed me on the cheek. And then maybe we could play a game of Scrabble, like old times? Sure, I smiled. But keep in mind, I'm not gonna give in. You don't have to, she laughed. You proved today that you can beat any opponent. We walked into the kitchen together, and as I pulled out the groceries for dinner, I thought about how everything in life really does come at the right time. Even disappointments and losses. They teach us to appreciate what we have and those who truly care about us. I lost a son, but kept a granddaughter. Lost illusions, but gained truth. And at 73, I have finally learned what I should have learned much earlier. No one has the right to decide for me how to live my life. Only myself.